Assalamu alaikum students. This is your instructor Muhammad Umar Khatak for the subject Organizational Theory and Behavior. This is our 17th lecture and chapter number 5. And today the topic of our discussion is values. Values. Is capital punishment right or wrong? If a person likes power, is that good or bad? The answers to these questions are value laden. Some might argue capital punishment is right because it is an appropriate retribution for crimes such as murder and treason. Others might argue just as strongly that no government has the right to take anyone's life. Values represent basic convictions that a specific mode of conduct or end state of existence is personally or socially preferable to an opposite or converse mode of conduct or end state of existence. They contain a judgmental element in that they carry an individual's ideas as to what is right, good, or desirable. Values have both content and intensity attributes. The content attribute says a mode of conduct or end state of existence is important. The intensity attribute specifies how important it is. When we rank an individual's values in terms of their intensity, we obtain that person's value system. All of us have a hierarchy of values that forms our value system. We find it in the relative importance we assign to values such as freedom, pleasure, respect, honesty, obedience, and equality. A significant portion of the values we hold is established in our early years by parents, teachers, friends, and others. As children, we are told certain behaviors or outcomes are always desirable or always undesirable, with few gray areas. You were never taught to be just a little bit honest or a little bit responsible, for example. It is this absolute or black or white learning of values that ensures their stability and endurance. If we question our values, of course they may change, but more often they are reinforced. There's also evidence linking personality to values, implying our values may be partly determined by our genetically transmitted traits. The importance of values. Values lay the foundation for our understanding of people's attitudes and motivation and influence our perceptions. We enter an organization with preconceived notions of what ought and ought not to be. These notions are not value free. On the contrary, they contain our interpretations of right and wrong and our preferences for certain behavior or outcomes over others. As a result, values cloud objectivity and rationality. They influence attitudes and behavior. Terminal versus instrumental values. Can we classify values? Yes, we review two approaches to developing value typologies. Rockich Value Survey. Milton Rockich created the Rockich Value Survey, RVS. It consists of two sets of values, each containing 18 individual value items. One set, called the terminal values, refers to desirable end states. These are the goals a person would like to achieve during his or her lifetime. The other set, called instrumental values, refers to preferable modes of behavior or means of achieving the terminal values. Some example of terminal values in the Rockich Value Survey are prosperity and economic success, freedom, health and well being, world peace, social recognition, and a meaning in life. The types of instrumental values illustrated in RVS are self improvement, autonomy, and self reliance, personal discipline, kindness, ambition, and goal orientation. Several studies confirm that RVS values vary among groups. People in the same occupation or categories, corporate managers, union members, parents, students, tend to hold similar values. One study compared corporate executive members of the Steelworkers Union and members of a community activist group. Although there was a good deal of overlap among them, there were also significant differences. The activists ranked equality as their most important terminal value. Executives and union members ranked this value 12th and 13th, respectively. Activists ranked helpful as their second highest instrumental value. The other two groups both ranked it 14. Because executive, union members, and activists all have a vested interest in what corporations do, these differences can create serious conflicts when groups contend with each other over an organization's economic and social policy. Generational values. Researchers have integrated several recent analyses of work values into four groups that attempt to capture the unique values of different cohorts of generations in the US workforce. Let's start with some limitations of this analysis. First, we make no assumption that the framework applies across all cultures. Second, despite a steady stream of press coverage, there is very little rigorous research on generational values. So we have to rely on an intuitive framework. Finally, these are imprecise categories. There is no law that someone born in 1985 can have values similar to those of someone born in 1955. Despite these limitations, values do change over generations, and we can gain some useful insights from analyzing values this way. Studies that have found differences across generations do not support the popular conception of how generations differ, and most are plagued with the methodological problems that make it difficult to assess whether differences exist. Now let's look at the diagram. Dominant work values in today's workforce. We're taking three generations: the boomers, the Generation Xers, and the nexters. Now, boomers born 1965 entered the workforce 1965 to 85. Generation X entered the workforce 1985 to 2000, and Generation Nexters entered the workforce from 2000 to present. Now, boomers are a large cohort born after World War II when veterans returned to the families and the times were good. Boomers entered the workforce from mid 1960s through mid 1980s. They brought with them a large measure of the hippie ethic and distrust of authority, but they place a great deal of emphasis on achievement and material success. Pragmatists who believe ends can justify means, they work hard and want to enjoy the fruits of their labor. Boomers see the organization that employ them merely as vehicle for their careers. Terminal values such as a sense of accomplishment and a social recognition rank high with them. Generation Xers. The lives of Xers have been shaped by globalization, two-career parents, MTV, AIDS, and computers. Generation Xers value flexibility, life options, and the characteristics of job satisfaction. Family and relationships are very important. Xers are skeptical, particularly of authority. They also enjoy team-oriented work in search of balance in their lives. Xers are less willing to make personal sacrifices for the sake of their employer than previous generations were. On RVS, they rate high on true friendship, happiness, and pleasure. The most recent entrants in the workforce, the millennials, also called as Netters, Nexters, Generation Years, and Generation Nexters grew up during prosperous time. They have high expectations and seek meaning in their work. Millennials have life goals more oriented towards becoming rich, 87%, and famous, 57%. Then do Generation Xers, 62% and 29% respectively. But they also see themselves as socially responsible, at ease with diversity. Millennials are the first generation to take technology for granted. More than other generations, they tend to be questioning, electronically networked, and entrepreneurial. At the same time, some have described millennials as entity, entitled, and needy. They may clash with other generations over work, attire, and communication. They also like feedback. Researchers found that 85% of the millennials want frequent and candid performance feedback, compared to only half of the boomers. Though it is fascinating to think about generational values, remember these classifications lack solid research support. Recent reviews suggest many of the generalizations are either overblown or incorrect. Studies have found differences across generations do not support the popular conceptions of how generations differ, and most are plagued with methodological problems that make it difficult to assess whether differences actually exist. One study that used an appropriate longitudinal design did find that the value placed on leisure increased over generations from the baby boomers to the millennials, and work centrality has declined. But it did not find that millennials had higher altruistic work values as expected. Generational classifications may help us understand our own and other generations better, but we must also appreciate their limits. Linking individual values and personalities to the workplace. 30 years ago, organizations were concerned only with the personality because their primary focus was to match individuals to specific jobs. That concern has expanded to include how well the individual's personality and the values match the organization. Managers today are less interested in an applicant's ability to perform a specific job than with his or her flexibility to meet changing situations and commitment to the organization. Person job fit. The effort to match job requirements with personality characteristics is best articulated in John Holland's personality job fit theory. Holland presents 6 personality types and proposes that satisfaction and the propensity to leave a position depend on how well an individual matches their personalities to the job. Holland developed the Vocational Preference Inventory Questionnaire, which contains 160 occupational titles. Respondents indicate which they like or dislike, and the answers form personality profiles. The theory argues that satisfaction is highest and turnover lowest when personality and occupation are in agreement. A realistic person in a realistic job is in more congruent situation than a realistic person in an investigative job. A realistic person in a social job is in the most incongruent situation possible. The key point of this model are there do appear to be intrinsic differences in personality among individuals. There are different types of jobs. People in jobs congruent with their personality should be more satisfied and less likely to voluntarily resign than people in the incongruent jobs. Person organization fit. We have noted that researchers have looked at matching people to organizations as well as to jobs. If an organization faces a dynamic and changing environment and requires employees able to readily change tasks and move easily between teams, it's more important than that employees' personalities fit with the overall organization's culture than with the characteristics of any specific job. The person organization fit essentially argues that people are attracted to and selected by organizations that match their values, and they leave organizations that are not compatible with their personalities. Using the Big Five terminology, for instance, we could expect that people high on extroversion fit well with aggressive and team oriented cultures, that people high on agreeableness match up better with a supportive organizational climate than one focused on aggressiveness, and that people high on openness to experience fit better in organizations that emphasize innovation rather than standardization. International values. Hofstede five value dimensions. One of the most widely referenced approaches for analyzing variations among cultures was done in the late 1970s by Geert Hofstede. He surveyed more than 116,000 IBM employees in 40 countries about their work related values and found that managers and employees vary on five value dimensions of national culture. Hofstede's five value dimensions. Now, the first one is power distance. Power distance describes the degree to which people in a country accept that power in institutions and organization is distributed unequally. A high rating on power distance means that large inequalities of power and wealth exist and are tolerated in the culture, as in a class or caste system that discourages upward mobility. A low power distance rating characterizes societies that stress equality and opportunity. Individualism versus collectivism. Individualism is the degree to which people prefer to act as individuals rather than as members of groups and believe in individual rights above all else. Collectivism emphasizes a tight social framework in which people expect others in groups of which they are a part of to look after each other and protect them. Masculinity versus femininity. Hofstede constructed construct of masculinity is the degree to which the culture favors traditional masculine roles such as achievement, power, and control, as opposed to viewing men and women as equals. A high masculinity rating indicates the culture has separate roles for men and women, with men dominating the society. A high femininity rating means that the culture sees little differentiation between male and female roles and treats women as equals to men in all respects. Uncertainty avoidance. The degree to which people in a country prefer structured or unstructured situation defines their uncertainty avoidance. In cultures that score high on uncertainty avoidance, people have an increased level of anxiety about uncertainty and ambiguity and use laws to control and reduce uncertainty. People in cultures low on uncertainty avoidance are more accepting of ambiguity and are less rule oriented, take more risks, and more readily accept change. Long term versus short term orientation. The newest addition to Hofstede's typology measures a society's devotion to traditional values. People in a culture with long term orientation look to the future and value thrift, persistence, and tradition. In a short term orientation, people value the here and now. They accept change more readily and don't see commitments as impediments to change. This would be the end of the lecture. Thank you.